Well, from Iranian missile attacks to pro-Palestinian protests and the bizarre attempt to blame a Jewish student for the Bondi stabbings, Australia's Jewish community could be forgiven for feeling under siege.
Joining us to discuss all of that and more is Alex Rivkin of the Executive Council of Australian Jewry and former New South Wales Police Minister David Elliott.
Thank you to both of you for joining us this evening. David, we'll start with you. I want to ask you firstly, though, about the police response to this, because as we've discussed earlier, there was so much conspiracy theories flying through Twitter. Police hadn't confirmed until today whether or not it was a terrorist incident. It is not a terrorist incident. But do you think police handled the situation correctly?
Well, I think the police response was textbook. From the Deputy Commissioner that took command straight away, Tony, to indeed Amy, the inspector who took out the offender. I think the Minister and the Commissioner have both come in at the right time. So I think public confidence will be at an all-time high. I think public appreciation of the police will be at an all-time high. And I think that the response from the Premier and the Minister alongside the Commissioner has been absolutely brilliant. And having been in those steps before, and I have been in touch with both the Commissioner and the Minister, because nobody knows what it's like in those leadership positions unless you've been in those leadership positions, and they are holding up well. I congratulate them both on their presence. But at the end of the day, this was, it wasn't a terrorist attack, but anything that creates terror is indeed a terrorist attack, and that created terror in Bondi yesterday.
Alex, let me go to you for a moment. Just talk to me about how the Jewish community are feeling, because, of course, when this first happened, a lot of people assumed this is a terror attack. We now know, as David said, it wasn't. I imagine there's a lot of relief in the Jewish community, but, of course, that was soured by the fact that people tried to identify a young Jewish uni student as the killer.
Yeah, well, Danica and I spoke just a few days ago on Friday, and at that point in time, the world was troubling and complex enough. And then in the intervening days, we've seen one of the most horrific incidents I can recall as an Australian, which happened in my backyard, very close to where I live, a place where I go with my family on at least a weekly basis. And then, as you said, there were these outrageous accusations that the assailant was a Jew, which was deliberately inserted in social media by activists, by influencers, designed to heap more hatred upon the Jewish community, perhaps even start a race war. And then we saw the appalling scenes from Israel, where we had a horrific act of war by Iran. So it's been, a harrowing, chilling period of time for the Jewish community, which we're kind of used to with the past 6 months. But certainly the attack at Bondi Junction was a horrific thing. And once the initial fear that this was a terror attack passed, our primary concern as all Australians was for the dead, for the injured, for the fact that something like this could happen in our country, in our suburbs, in our shopping centres. It's just a baffling incident and one of the most horrific things we've seen in this country for a long, long time.
Yeah, it certainly is. I think we're all still stunned about what happened. Just moving forward now, David, there are mass anti-Israel protests planned around the country for tomorrow. Protesters are promising to block key choke points to inflict economic pain. Now, these organisers have refused to give police details in order to create maximum disruption. What will the police response to this be like?
Well, that's an offence. If you're protesting and you don't have a police permit, well, that's an offence. Nobody denies. The police certainly are the last ones to deny anybody the right to express their political opinion in Australia. But if they're doing it without the appropriate authority, well, that's an offence.
Can I ask you something on that? Because a lot of people say during COVID, do you remember police arrested a woman for posting about a protest on Facebook? So if it's an offence, why haven't police gone and sought out the leaders of these protests planned for tomorrow and taken,
Well, I'd be very surprised if they don't know exactly who's going to be organising the protest tomorrow, and I'd be very surprised if those people aren't under surveillance by a number of law enforcement agencies, both here and overseas. But my message to the police was that, they will get all the political air cover they need from most reasonable politicians if they take the maximum amount of authority or use the maximum amount of authority they've got available to them.
Yeah. And Alex, just a question to you on that. As this pro-Palestine protest is scheduled across the country tomorrow, how is the Jewish community feeling about it?
Well, I think like all Australians, we're sick and tired of this stuff. And we've seen for 6 months, we've seen from the very evening of the October 7 attacks, before Israel even commenced its response to those atrocities, people on our streets celebrating, glorifying unspeakable crimes against civilians. And we've been seeing it on a rolling basis throughout our country. And we've had enough. I mean, these protests masquerade as being about, peace and calls for a humanitarian ceasefire. But when you probe deeper and look at the rhetoric, the signs, the chants, the individuals who are driving these protests, they want war, they want killing, they just want Israel to lose. And tomorrow, if they protest, they'll be cheering for the Houthis as they've done throughout.
Yep.
They'll be cheering for Hezbollah, for Hamas, and for the Iranian regime.
All right, Alex Rivchin and David Elliott, we've got to leave it there. Thank you so much for joining us this evening.